The only women Voldemort could never love you are the most powerful dark wizard in a century, and you cannot feel the one thing every human being is built to feel. Not because of a curse someone else cast on you, because of the curse you were born into. There were 4 women who tried, in their own broken ways, to reach whatever was left of a heart inside Tom Riddle. One gave him life and lost hers doing it. One tried to buy his affection with treasures. One built an entire identity around loving him and got a corpse's version of love back. And one, a snake, ended up being the closest thing to a companion he ever kept close. Let's go through all 4 and figure out why none of them ever stood a chance.
The woman who made you then left you start at the beginning, because that's where the damage starts too. Maripagon was poor, abused, and half-starved of affection her entire life. Her father and brother treated her like something to be mocked, not a daughter or a sister. So when a wealthy young muggle named Tom Riddle Sr. rode past her village on his horse, she fell for him instantly and completely. He never once looked back, so she did what desperate people in the wizarding world sometimes do. Dumbledore believed she slipped him a love potion, Amortensia probably, and for a while it worked. Tom Riddle Sr. married her. He seemed happy. He seemed in love. But here's the thing about a love you brew in a cauldron. It isn't real. And somewhere deep down, the person under it can sense it. At some point, either Maripe stopped dosing him, or she simply believed real love had grown between them and let her guard down. She was wrong. The moment the potion wore off, Tom Riddle Sr. wasn't looking at a wife anymore. He was looking at a stranger who had trapped him into a marriage he never wanted. He left. Pregnant, penniless, and abandoned in London, Maripe had nothing left but the ability to see the future in shop windows just to make rent. She gave birth to a son on a cold New Year's Eve in a muggle orphanage, refusing to give a healer her name, refusing even to stay alive long enough to hold him past that first night. That baby was Tom Marvolo Riddle, the man the world would later know as Lord Voldemort. Rowling herself has said the symbolism here isn't subtle. It wasn't the potion itself that broke something in him. It's that he came into the world as the product of a lie, born into a home with no mother, no father, and nobody who chose to love him for free. But here's where it gets darker. Rowling also said something else, almost as an afterthought that changes everything. If Maripe had lived, if she had raised him and loved him the way a mother is supposed to, he might have turned out completely different. So the tragedy isn't that Voldemort was born broken, it's that he wasn't. He was born into a house with the door already closed. The woman he killed for a cup, fast forward a few decades. Tom Riddle is grown now, brilliant, charming, and already collecting the objects that will one day tear his soul into pieces. Enter Hepzibah Smith. She was old, rich, and lonely in the way that only the very wealthy can be, surrounded by beautiful things and very few people who actually wanted to be around her. She claimed descent from Helga Hufflepuff herself, and she had the receipts to prove it. A golden cup passed down through her family, and a locket that had once belonged to Salazar Slytherin. When young Tom Riddle started visiting her, working under an assumed identity at a shop that dealt in magical antiques, Hepzibah lit up. Here was a handsome young man paying attention to her, complimenting her collection, sitting through her stories. She thought she'd found a friend, maybe more. She had actually invited her own murderer into her home for tea. Tom didn't want her company. He wanted what she owned. The cup, the locket, 2 objects tied to 2 of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, both practically begging to become vessels for a piece of his soul. So he poisoned her cocoa, framed her elderly house elf for the crime using a memory charm so clean nobody questioned it for decades, and walked out with both treasures in his pocket. Hepzibah Smith spent her final weeks feeling, for once, like someone found her interesting. She died never knowing that the boy she adored saw her as nothing but a locked case waiting to be opened. Therefore, by the time Voldemort turns 30, the pattern is already impossible to ignore. Every woman who has extended warmth toward him has been repaid with either abandonment or a body count. The woman who loved a corpse and called it devotion. Now we get to the one relationship people argue about more than any other in the entire series. Bellatrix Lestrange. She was 17 the first time she met him. Pure blood, brilliant, dangerously skilled and utterly captivated. While most of his followers feared him the way you'd fear a loaded weapon, Bellatrix worshipped him the way you'd worship a god. She married a man named Bellatrix Lestrange, but by every account, that marriage was a formality, a business arrangement between two pure-blood families. Her devotion, her obsession, her entire personality reorganized itself around one man, and it wasn't her husband. Voldemort trained her personally in the dark arts. He trusted her, more than almost anyone else in his inner circle, with one of his Horcruxes, Helga Hufflepuff's cup, the very same one he'd stolen from Hepzibah Smith decades earlier. When his other followers failed him, he punished them severely. When Bellatrix failed him at the Department of Mysteries, he kept her close instead. Was that love? But here's the uncomfortable answer. Probably not. Not the way Bellatrix wanted it to be. Voldemort had a daughter with her, a girl named Delphi, born in secret sometime before the Battle of Hogwarts. She wasn't raised in a nursery with her parents' names on the door. She was hidden away, tucked out of sight, kept as a secret so carefully guarded that most of the wizarding world wouldn't learn she existed until years after the war ended. To Bellatrix, that child might have meant everything, proof that some part of him could still choose her. But there's no real evidence Voldemort ever loved her back, not the way she loved him. Everything about that pregnancy reads less like romance and more like a transaction. He didn't want a family, he wanted an heir, someone to carry forward what he'd built, the same way his Horcruxes carried forward pieces of his soul. Therefore, the daughter grew up carrying a weight no child should have to carry. Delphi wasn't raised to be loved either. She was raised in hiding on stories of her father's greatness, and she grew up believing she had one purpose, bringing him back and restoring the Dark Lord's rule. Bellatrix died in the Battle of Hogwarts, cut down by Molly Weasley after nearly killing her daughter. She died a Death Eater, a mother, and a woman who had spent her entire adult life mistaking obsession for something mutual. Voldemort didn't grieve her, he barely noticed. Now, it's worth saying the Delphi reveal is one of the most argued about twists in the entire franchise. A lot of longtime fans felt it sat awkwardly next to everything we'd been told about Voldemort, a man who supposedly saw children as nothing but a liability, suddenly having one in secret. Whether you buy it or not, it fits the pattern we've been tracing all episode. Even the one time Voldemort came closest to creating something resembling a family, it wasn't built on love. It was built on legacy, hidden away, and passed down like just another Horcrux. The companion who understood him best and wasn't even human. Here's the twist nobody expects. The closest thing to genuine companionship Voldemort ever kept wasn't a woman at all. It was a giant snake named Nagini. Think about that for a second. A man incapable of trust, incapable of warmth, incapable of anything resembling partnership, chose to keep one creature permanently by his side for years. Not a Death Eater, not a lover. A snake he could speak to in parcel tongue. A language that made him feel, for the only time in his life, like he wasn't alone in a room. Nagini wasn't just a pet. Eventually, she became a Horcrux herself, carrying a literal fragment of his soul inside her. Of everyone who had ever tried to get close to Tom Riddle, human or otherwise, the only one he trusted enough to fuse a piece of himself into was a snake that couldn't speak back in words, couldn't ask him for anything, couldn't ever leave him the way his father did. That should tell you everything about what Voldemort actually wanted from connection. Not love, not partnership, loyalty that asked for nothing in return. So what was he actually incapable of? Hey, let's clear something up, because the fandom has spent 2 decades arguing about this and mostly getting it wrong. It was never really about the potion. Rowling has said directly that the love potion was symbolic, a way of showing he came from a loveless union, not some magical switch that flipped his heart off at conception. The real damage happened after. A mother who died before she could hold him, an orphanage that raised him without warmth, a childhood where the only currency that ever worked was fear, and fear he understood perfectly. So he built himself a philosophy instead. Love is a weakness. Attachment is a liability. The only lasting thing is power, and the only immortality worth having is the kind you manufacture yourself, piece by piece, soul fragment by soul fragment. Merope tried to buy love with a potion and lost her life for it. Hepzibah offered warmth and got poison in her cocoa. Bellatrix built a religion around a man who saw her as useful, not beloved. And in the end, the only one who got something resembling permanence from him was a snake. Dumbledore said it best, near the end of everything, that which Voldemort does not value at all, he takes no trouble to comprehend. He never failed to love these women because he was incapable of it in some mystical, potion-induced way. He failed to love them because somewhere around age 1, in a cold London orphanage, he decided love wasn't worth understanding at all. And that decision outlived every single woman who ever tried to prove him wrong. If you're the kind of person who likes pulling stories apart like this, figuring out why characters or people end up the way they do, we've got a free community for creators and storytellers called Wavy World. Links below if you want in.